Air pollution from motor vehicles is an example of a negative externality. The costs of the air pollution for the rest of society is not compensated for by either the producers or users of motorized transport. In economics, an externality is the cost or benefit that affects a party who did not choose to incur that cost or benefit. 1. Economists often urge governments to adopt policies that internalize an externality, so that costs and benefits will affect mainly parties who choose to incur them. 2. For example, manufacturing activities that cause air pollution impose health and cleanup costs on the whole society, whereas the neighbors of an individual who chooses to fireproof his home may benefit from a reduced risk of a fire spreading to their own houses. If external costs exist, such as pollution, the producer may choose to produce more of the product than would be produced if the producer were required to pay all associated environmental costs. Because responsibility or consequence for self-directed action lies partly outside the self, an element of externalization is involved. If there are external benefits, such as in public safety, less of the good may be produced than would be the case if the producer were to receive payment for the external benefits to others. For the purpose of these statements, overall cost and benefit to society is defined as the sum of the imputed monetary value of benefits and costs to all parties involved. 3-4. Thus, unregulated markets in goods or services with significant externalities generate prices that do not reflect the full social cost or benefit of their transactions. Such markets are therefore inefficient.
I want to talk about social externalities. It is not just a concept that can be applied to economics, but also to social dynamics. The results of social externalities may lead to social costs as well as economic ones, and it is often both. Female behavior is not only far less regulated than male behavior, bad female behavior is even incentivized by society. Single motherhood by choice has a massively negative effect on society. Not only are taxpayers paying money towards mothers who choose to discard the father of their children, they are paying to incentivize women to raise kids that are damaged and unproductive. The man pays the social costs of having his bond with his kids disregarded, and society pays the economic costs of the damaged children raised by a single mother. Let me give another example. A young woman goes to university. She is studying for a degree. While she is studying, she is looking for a high-status male, and finds one. She starts dating a promising young man who is studying to be a medical doctor. She sleeps with him and then gets impregnated by him. As far as she is concerned, she has snagged herself a good man now. He only needs the man to go with the flow and accept his role as father. This woman comes from a so-called traditional family, so the father of the young woman threatens the young man and tells him he better man up and marry his daughter. The white knight father is forcing the young man to pay for the choices of the young woman. He will end up bearing the social and financial costs. The young man doesn't want his legs broken, so he complies with the demands of the girl's father. Now that she is pregnant, the young woman drops out of university. She had applied to university under a taxpayer-funded grant to encourage women into STEM. Not only did the taxpayers have to fund her female privilege, she has taken an opportunity from another female by taking the place of a potentially more productive female. This selfish and lazy woman has passed the social costs of her laziness on to her new husband. He has less freedom now. He also will have to fund the family unit that she is the head of. He is basically a slave. The woman has also wasted taxpayers' money and passed the economic costs on to the rest of society. After 10 years, this woman will divorce her husband due to boredom. She will pass the social costs on to the kids, as she will deny their father visitation. The kids will grow up with behavioral problems and emotional disorders. The father will end up killing himself since the stress of paying a massive child support bill will be too much. The white knight divorce judge also gave the wife the house, since she had sacrificed her career to be a mother. The woman will find a new man to settle down with. She has lived an easy life, and has aged well. Some sucker will be willing to man up and provide for her. He will gladly bear the burden of being a good man, willing to provide for her kids. This scenario plays out all the time. Females have more social power than men and have more choices than men. Tao is about taking away female choices from women, by refusing to serve them. Sadly, the men's rights movement has no teeth, and is not willing to take away female choices. The men's rights movement is about bringing men and women back together somehow. Feminists use the false rhetoric of equality and fairness, MRAs use the same anti-platitudes and somehow hope it will lead to a better outcome for men. Feminists will advocate for their own sex at the cost of men. They will try and get the state to enact laws that will make men pay the costs of female choices. A lot of the time, the state is more than willing to comply. What the MRA needs to fight against is the female collective practicing social externalities against the collective of men. MRAs need to play identity politics. Since MRAs are trying to win women back, this will never happen. Feminists don't worry about their relationships with men when they used the state to attack men. They knew they could take their relationships with men for granted. They knew that men would be willing to pay any price, bear any cost to be with a female. MRAs need to stop worrying about relationships with women. They have to deal with the interests of men as a collective. They have to be all business. There is a limit to what even men will put up with. There is a limit to the price men are willing to pay. Mtao is men as individuals refusing to pay the price willingly. At the moment this is the only way men can fight back, since the MRA is useless. Men should not pay to go on dates with women. Men should not bail women out of trouble, often trouble that is self-inflicted. Men should not worry about the plight of women at all. Women are on their own. They have made it this way. Women have to pay the costs of their actions. Men have to simply stop paying. Women pretend to have no agency, so men end up bearing the burden of female choices. Women have agency as far as I am concerned, and even if you could scientifically prove to me that females have no free will, I wouldn't care. I would still expect women to shoulder the burdens of their erratic and selfish behavior. To finish off, let's hear the late great Angry Harry talk about society paying for the costs of female entitlement.
Is the training of women doctors a waste of money? UK GP shortage to worsen as young doctors switch to part-time work. June 2003. More than half of all students taking up scarce places at medical school are women. Yet, after 10 years, 60% of them have given up, leaving a huge hole in the NHS. The same goes for teaching. Alice Thompson. September 2012, rising numbers of women doctors working part-time present a huge risk to the NHS, the General Medical Council is warning, with hospitals potentially having to employ many more foreign-trained medics to plug gaps. January 2014. Although I am a feminist, in the NHS hospital in which I work as a surgeon, some of the best doctors are women. This shift of the gender balance in medicine is a worrying trend. Professor J. Thomas. I believe it is creating serious workforce problems, and has profound implications for the way the NHS works. The continuing deterioration of the National Health Service, despite the enormous extra sums of money being put into it by the taxpayer, is largely thanks to the training of more and more women to become doctors in the place of men. The requirement to give women equal opportunities is leading to far worse conditions and shortfalls in the NHS. In areas such as medicine, the requirement to give women equal opportunities by demanding that medical schools try to train as many women as they do men to become doctors is leading to far worse conditions and shortfalls in the NHS, a service that is already failing the country abysmally. The fact that so many of these women doctors will take out years from their profession in order to have children and to look after them, with some never returning, is a major drain on a system that is already unable to cope. In theory, it sounds great to have as many women doctors working in the NHS as men. In practice, however, the consequence is that everyone has to wait a good deal longer to be dealt with, and the entire service is considerably less efficient. And with waiting lists already far too long even for urgent surgical operations, the price for this equality is rather high. And it costs some people their health and some people their lives. Most people have a great deal of sympathy with the view that women should be permitted to become doctors working for the NHS if they have the requisite abilities, even if they do log out of the system to bring up families. But there is a price to be paid. In the case of the NHS, everyone who uses it pays a price, particularly the old, the young, the weak, the vulnerable and the sick. In fact, the most needy of all pay the price. And these are mostly women. Many times more women are negatively affected by an impoverished NHS than there are women doctors. Indeed, many times more women are negatively affected by an impoverished NHS than there are women doctors. Indeed, all women are affected by this. Further, of course, all of us will need medical treatment at some stage in our lives. And so all of us will suffer from the adverse effects of an NHS that is greatly diminished by the low long-term career aspirations of a relatively small number of women. January 2014, UK citizens will now be aware that tens of thousands of people are known to have died over the years, with thousands more having received appalling treatment, because of the serious shortcomings that have arisen in the NHS over the past 3 decades. Furthermore, the training of doctors is a very expensive business that stretches well beyond the 5 years that students spend at medical school. And with 60% of women doctors giving up their careers within 10 years, the training of women to become doctors is largely a waste of taxpayers' money. Moreover, the country loses the potential talents of all those young men who would have embarked upon long-term careers in medicine were it not for the fact that women were taking up the places of medical schools. And, of course, as with all the major professions, experience is just about everything. And so when women doctors in the NHS give up their careers after a few years of work, the country is denied the services of men doctors who would actually have had the same period of experience. And who would then have gone on to get even more experience. In other words, these future highly experienced doctors are lost forever. In summary, the training of women to become doctors significantly degrades the health system. It harms the most needy of people the most. It negatively impacts on all of us. It is a waste of taxpayers' money. And it persistently deprives the country of a large number of highly experienced doctors. But that's feminism for you. As in so many other areas, it has a huge cost. And why do we inflict this huge cost upon the nation? We do this so that a few thousand women can benefit from having a career in medicine. We do this so that a few thousand women can benefit from having a career in medicine, with most of them choosing to abandon it for something more to their liking. What is the solution? Do we stop women from becoming doctors by giving all the limited number of places at medical schools to men? Well, the purpose of this article was not to provide a particular solution to this problem, but to point out that this is yet another area where feminism extracts a very large price from just about everyone for the benefit of a few women. This needs to be pointed out rather than swept under the carpet. Indeed, this ideology puts more importance on the career aspirations of a few thousand women than it does on the health of the entire nation, including the health of our children. This issue also highlights the impossibility of achieving the gender equity. Furthermore, this issue also highlights the impossibility of achieving the gender equity so often loudly espoused by current-day feminists with rarely a thought to what it might actually mean. The phrase gender equity is virtually meaningless. For example, how, exactly, does one achieve gender equity with regard to the training of women doctors? Do we force women doctors to stay at their posts so that the gender balance of highly experienced doctors remains the same throughout the decades? Would this achieve gender equity? No. It would not. And there would be permanent public outrage orchestrated by the feminists on the grounds of sex discrimination. Do we train twice as many women doctors as men? Do we train twice as many women doctors as men in medical schools to allow for the fact that half of the women will drop out, on the grounds that unless we do this women will not have access to the same number of experienced women doctors as men have to men doctors? Would this achieve gender equity? No. It would not. Such a solution would clearly discriminate very heavily against talented young men who wanted to go to medical school. And it would result in the most enormous waste of taxpayers' money and a diversion of scarce educational resources toward the very group of people, women, most likely to squander them, with the negative consequences being worst for the most sick and the most vulnerable people in our society. So, what equitable solutions to this particular problem of women doctors choosing to quit the medical profession would gender equity feminists actually propose? And what do we do about the feminist mullahs and their media lackeys who continue stirring up hatred toward men by blaming them for the fact that relatively few women eventually reach high office in the world of medicine, despite the case being that it is clearly the women themselves who, statistically speaking, have little interest in achieving high office? 40 years ago, Those who interviewed students who wanted places at medical schools used to grill them very aggressively with questions designed to find out how likely they were to stick with the profession once they had qualified. They did not want to expend their scarce resources training people who were going to end up wasting them. Nowadays, however, no expense is spared in order to pander to the selfish desires of a few women, no matter how detrimental these desires may be to the lives of everyone else. UK crippling Africa's healthcare. Many doctors overseas apply to work in the UK each year. The UK is crippling sub-Saharan Africa's healthcare system by poaching its staff. UK doctors have warned. We actually have to poach doctors from some very impoverished parts of the world. Yep, we actually have to poach doctors from some very impoverished parts of the world because 60% of our own women doctors give up their jobs within 10 years, with a further huge percentage only willing to work part-time. Despite the appalling problems that this causes to our health service and, as indicated above, also to those impoverished people who live in countries that cannot afford to lose their doctors to us, we, in the UK, will continue to waste our precious medical resources training annually a few thousand women who wish to play around at being doctors for a short number of years. And we will continue to do this because nothing, absolutely nothing, must stand in the way of even a small number of women doing whatever they want to do, no matter how much is the cost to everyone else. The scale of the influx of foreign doctors and nurses into the British Health Service has been disclosed. It shows that nearly 190,000 doctors and nurses have come to the country from outside the EU in just 8 years. Bleeding Africa dry.